Cognitive abilities refer to the ability to receive information, especially through perception, the ability to process information through thought and language, and the ability to store information in memory. Exactly how these abilities develop has been explained slightly differently by different psychologists. Jean Piaget emphasized biological maturing and the child's own activity, while Lev Vygotsky saw culture and the social environment as more important. Piaget's view is called constructivistic and Vygotsky's socio-cultural theory of cognitive development. One important difference between these views is that Vygotsky considered development as a continuous progression, while Piaget saw it consisting of distinct, discontinuous steps or phases. Theories of cognitive development can often be assigned to either of these two basic types. In the following, I will first explain some of the key ideas of these two developmental psychologists, and then I will briefly discuss some later theories. Finally, I will provide a very simplified overview of cognitive development through life. My name is Jouni Vilkka, and this is my channel, TFF, Teacher from Finland. You want to click the thumbs up button and then subscribe to my channel. Piaget defined two basic mechanisms of thinking and learning. Assimilation occurs when new information or experience is assimilated into previously existing schemas, meaning mental models, such as concepts or scripts for interaction or behavior. We try to make sense of new information or observation by fitting it into what we already know. Accommodation happens when you have to change the schemas or even generate new ones to be able to comprehend the new information or experience. For example, you might have the schema of a uniform as something a police officer wears. You might then visit a foreign country and see a person wearing something that looks to you like a uniform, just not what you are used to seeing cops wear. You assimilate this new information to the schema of uniform, which now will include several types of uniform, making it easy for you to recognize other different types of uniform. But it could also be that you have thought that uniforms are something only police officers or soldiers wear, and now you encounter someone from the Salvation Army. If you understand that despite its name that is not an actual army and the person is not a soldier, you will have to accommodate your schema by making it broader. Even civilians can wear uniforms, and some cults, for example, do like them. Of course, you might also be aware of school uniforms used in some countries. According to Vygotsky, thinking and speech develop through three phases. The first is the phase of social or external speech. In this phase, the infant uses language to direct other people, and their thinking is not very complicated. Between 3 and 6 years of age is the phase of egocentric speech, when the child uses speech to direct its own behavior. After this comes the phase of internal, silent speech, that is, thinking. At this stage, this is also the predominant form of speech, although the others can still be used. This enables the development of higher cognitive skills. The ability to speak is fundamentally made possible by genetics, but to develop normally, the child must be exposed to language during the sensitive period, and if the child is not properly exposed to language at all during the critical period, it will never learn a language, as I have explained before. Very young babies are already able to recognize the language of their caregivers. Babies babble and thus practice producing sounds, even if they are deaf, in which case they eventually stop doing so. Babies can always understand more than they can produce, of course. Babies also begin to learn interaction and speech through proto-conversation, where the adult gives the baby a turn to say something and possibly repeats what they think it might be that the baby wants to say. Babies also try to repeat the sounds they hear until at about 1 year after birth they finally say their first words. Adults usually speak to infants differently than to other people, even preschoolers. This infant-directed speech, IDS, has a higher pitch, involves a lot of repetition, with minor variations and even repeating what the infant says but adding more to it. This universal phenomenon clearly helps the infant learn to use language faster and grammatically more correctly. Studies have also found that infants prefer to listen to this kind of speech rather than normal speech, even if the language used is not known to the infant. Near the end of their second year begins the infant's first question-asking phase, when they try to learn what things are and what they are called. Their development is very rapid. The second question-asking phase is between 3 and 4 years of age, when they are interested in more abstract questions about the reasons and causes of things. After 7 or 8, the child uses language pretty much like adults, although might not understand irony. The more they read, the better their vocabulary is going to be. Poverty is related to language learning, but not because the poor are stupid, as some would like to believe, but because in poor families there are fewer resources. The parents may not have much education, which makes their language also poor in comparison. They might not have the time to spend talking with their children because they have to work. When they do have the time, they may be too tired from the hard work. They don't have access to educational materials such as stimulating toys, children's books with recorded sounds, or even ordinary books. This is one reason why public libraries are extremely important, as is free education. Piaget is most famous for his theory of cognitive development. According to this theory, children develop through discrete stages. These stages also contain sub-stages, but we'll focus on just the big picture here. I'll also include some suggestions regarding play and toys from the Play, Learn, Thrive blog here. Check out the link below. Those tips could be useful for parents who want to provide their children with the best learning environment. First is the sensory motor stage, starting from birth and lasting until the acquisition of language at about 2 years of age. The baby uses their senses to learn about the world, exploring as much as their ability to move allows. Babies begin learning through play, and they begin that together with an adult. It is mostly about grasping objects. The biological reflex guides the baby to begin this, and after a while it can learn to take hold and let go intentionally. Reflexes turn into schemas, and the infant begins to direct itself more. Suitable toys would be colorful objects that have different textures and shapes, and some that make sounds. These characteristics provide a lot of stimuli for the baby that help it develop cognitively. Second is the pre-operational stage, from about 2 to 6 years of age. The child at this stage is self-centered, unable to consider another person's point of view. For example, seeing objects that are hidden from another person, the child will still think that the other person also sees them as well. Children at this stage will talk with others, but They don't really play together with other children, just parallel to each other. The child also attributes objects like toys with thoughts and feelings, assuming a sort of animism. The child is still unable to think in terms of logical chains of events, but instead thinks intuitively, according to their immediate impressions. They understand that objects are used for certain things, that they have a purpose. They need the adults to show what to do with the objects, after which they can use the objects in more or less the same way. A bit later, they can also use other objects, pretending them to be something else. This is called symbol function. For example, in the earlier stage, a real phone, although turned off, could be used, but later any other object could be used as if it's a phone. In the pre-operational stage, children start to play pretend games where they take different roles. They can have imaginary friends as well. Various kinds of dolls, costumes for dressing up, building blocks, as well as paper and drawing tools are good toys for kids at this stage. Third is the concrete operational stage, from about age 6 or 7 to 11 or 12 years of age. At this stage, the child is able to mentally rewind an event they have witnessed to the original state using their memory. They now begin to think logically and can also understand the conservation of volume, so that even if water is poured from a glass to another of a different shape, they now understand that the amount of water stays the same. Thus, they can no longer be tricked by their older siblings to think that the amount of juice in two glasses of different shapes is the same, just as long as the level of the fluid is equal. They realize the volume is different. Children at this stage can solve problems and enjoy puzzles and logic games and games with rules in general. They will probably like to build things with Legos or similar building toys, as well as crafting things from wood, cloth or other materials. I would also recommend trying actual board games rather than just snakes and ladders, so you can play chess or even Carcassonne with them. Although perhaps you need to use simplified rules with the more complex board games at first. Kids at this age could also be introduced to tabletop role-playing games. Fourth and last is the formal operational stage, beginning at 11 or 12. Abstract thinking is now possible, and metacognitive skills that can be used to assess one's own knowledge and skills are learned. Being able to reflect on one's own behavior and plan for the future, the child can now take on more responsibility. They are also improving their control of their own emotions. They begin to consider other people more. Their empathy is increased. They become interested in more complicated games, like real board games and strategic games, and hobbies of their own. They might be interested in the sciences. I would recommend many different kinds of books and magazines, especially for kids around 12, about popular science, scientific skepticism, as well as fantasy books like Lord of the Rings. Of course, supporting their own interests if they already know what they like is a good idea. Broadening those interests by giving suggestions would also be a good idea. Practicing sports, perhaps martial arts, would be a good way for the kid to learn to stay physically active and to improve coordination and control of their body. Although Piaget stopped there, other researchers have added a post-formal thinking stage. While young people tend to think in black and white and in other simplistic ways like that, an adult is able to see the relative merits of different points of view and to consider contradictory things. For example, an adult will understand the difference between the law and what is right, even when the law is in general a good guideline. Unfortunately, not everyone reaches this level of adulthood, despite their age. Playing games doesn't need to end with childhood. There are games and toys for adults as well. Whether these toys for adults continue to educate and advance the development of the players, I cannot say, but there certainly is money involved. I heard this saying from a marketing teacher. The difference between men and boys is the price of their toys. Piaget's theory was an important achievement in that it brought attention to cognitive development and several important aspects of it. It proved to be incorrect in depicting children as more uniform than they actually are. Infants and young children are also more cognitively competent than Piaget thought, and he understates how much the social world of a child contributes to their development. Lastly, his theory is a bit vague on processes and mechanisms. The point is that it was a good start, and knowing the basics of the theory is important background knowledge, not something to be taken as the correct explanation of how children actually develop. Later research has improved on his work, as always should be the case in science. The cognitive development of children has been studied from different perspectives, of course. Information processing theories typically use task analysis, where they identify the goals and information in the environment and possible strategies for processing information, and seek to predict children's behavior in the given circumstances. These theories view children as problem solvers who are under continuous construction, so to speak, because they grow continuously and incrementally, not in leaps from a stage to the next, as Piaget theorized. The capacity of the processing system improves as they grow, and they learn more strategies and knowledge that improves their abilities. Core knowledge theories consider children to be active learners who enter this world equipped not only with the most general learning abilities, as Piaget thought, but also with specialized learning mechanisms. These are mental structures that make it easy for them to acquire information that is of evolutionary importance. For example, the ability to recognize faces and the interest in faces seems advantageous from a survival point of view. Noam Chomsky famously proposed that we also have innate language learning mechanisms that are especially effective in early childhood. It has been suggested that children form theories of various domains, such as non-living objects, living things, plants and animals, and minds. They explain phenomena based on these categories and the so-called theories they have formed about the things in the categories. This includes explaining events without observable causes. For example, a dog is assumed to want to eat because it is hungry, or an adult is assumed to want to read a book if they have placed one on a coffee table. Core knowledge theorists explain how children begin with rudimentary theories about the world, but improve on them as they grow older and experience new things. Socio-cultural theories, following Lev Vygotski's, see interactions as of utmost importance, as interactions are the driving mechanisms behind development. Not just parents, but siblings, playmates, teachers and other people in their lives interact with the children and thus help them acquire new skills and knowledge considered important in their culture. So whereas Piaget focused on the individual, these theories emphasize the importance of interactions, especially guided participation and cultural tools. Cultural tools refers to symbol systems, artifacts, and even skills and values. Socio-cultural theories show how culture is embodied in even the smallest everyday interactions, not just in what is being said, but also what is in the environment and background, technological, economic, and historical factors. They emphasize the importance of intersubjectivity and joint attention in early development. The latter means simply that the social partner helps the infant by focusing attention on something in the environment together with the infant, and also the infant learning to direct the other's attention at what they are interested in. It is very important for learning a language. It is part of the wider intersubjectivity, which continues to develop at least into school age, and is important for learning rules and roles in games and then other life in general, and for taking the perspectives of other people and for learning from others. Dynamic systems theories focus on how change occurs over time in complex systems. Instead of periods of stability in stages, they see development as constant change. As the baby learns to reach for things, new possibilities open up, and as they learn to crawl and then toddle around, even more becomes possible. These possibilities also influence others around them, especially the parents, who then behave in new ways. For example, by preventing the child from exploring in dangerous ways, and by interacting with the child in more complex ways that provide further stimuli. The child forms a dynamic system that seeks to attain goals, and in order to do so, integrates perception, memory, motivation, language, and conceptual understanding and knowledge. Development is seen as a self-organizing process of adaptation. While taking much inspiration from the earlier theories, dynamic systems theories emphasize motivation and the role of action more. Here's a simplified overview of cognitive development through the whole of a person's life. Many things can go wrong already before one is born. The circumstances of the mother's life are especially important. Alcohol abuse or just chronic stress is harmful for the embryo and fetus. Genetic disorders are also a possibility. Just bad luck. Other than these, the fetus develops and already months before birth learns to recognize the mother's smell and sound, and so is not born as a completely blank slate. A baby already stores memories of the situations where it has interaction with others as episodic memories. Recurring situations form a representation of those situations and strengthen the memory. In the brain, this means that the synaptic connections and associative circuitry become stronger. The newborn's senses are not yet working perfectly, and it is a huge task for it just to make sense of the surrounding reality. In a few months, it will be able to detect shapes, especially faces, and also colors. Moving limbs is not at first voluntary, but interacting with toys and perhaps being helped by the caregivers helps the infant to get a better body awareness. As the muscles get stronger, it becomes possible for the infant to explore the world more as it learns to turn over and crawl. A toddler is able to form enduring mental representations of behaviors it has observed, and in what is called deferred imitation, imitate that behavior even days after observing it. They learn a language, or in some cases more than one, and explore the world eagerly, learning new things. They are unable to take the point of view of another until they develop the so-called theory of mind. I find it interesting that as toddlers learn to draw and become adept enough to draw something more recognizable than just a messy scribble, they start drawing so-called tadpole people. These are faces with limbs and possibly hair, but no body. For example, they can draw their parents with hair or some other feature distinguishing one from the other. A child in play age is able to distinguish imaginings from reality. This will also make their fears more realistic. The child has a lot of motivation for exploration and learning about new things. By age 5, they will usually be able to tell stories, and they use this skill to express their thoughts and emotions. This ability is a good predictor of later success at school. When they go to school, there may be a drop in motivation to learn as they come into constant contact with peers. Social cognition becomes highly important, and they also have to learn a lot of information in a small amount of time at school. They also, importantly, learn to use techniques to improve their memory performance and to apply them even outside the original context, such as studying for exams. An adolescent, hopefully, learns to think critically and to apply those critical thinking skills broadly in their lives. Their worldview may be highly idealistic, and they may experience an ideological crisis. Fluid intelligence is at its height at the end of this period, but crystallized intelligence is just beginning to form. This means that at the cusp of maturity and in early adulthood, thinking is at its fastest, and young people can be sharp and witty, but they haven't yet learned as much information and different ways of doing things as older adults have. The older adults no longer have as much fluid intelligence, but can make up for this by having developed more crystallized intelligence. Abstract thinking also continues to improve during adulthood. Adults start losing fluid intelligence at some point during middle age or later. Life experience improves the ability to solve problems, improving post-formal thinking. In the world we now live in, it is no longer enough to study while young, as more and more people have to train for new jobs even in middle age. Much of work is in general very cognitive, and so adults are often forced to learn new things throughout their careers. In older age, cognitive functions get slower, although not dramatically, unless there is damage to the brain from injury or disease. The first symptoms of such damage are usually memory problems. Even without such damage, the folds in the brain get shallower and nerve connections between cells are reduced, causing the brain to become smaller in mass. The production of neurotransmitters slows down as well. These changes are slowed down by active life and practicing. In the end, human life is very short, at least compared to what we might wish for when we are still at our best, or at least in a good mental and physical shape. Despite our fantasies, wishful thinking, and science fiction stories, our minds cannot exist without the brain and some kind of body sustaining it, so death is inevitable. For many old people, not being able to die with dignity is a greater fear than the fear of death. Their bodies might outlive their minds, as various diseases can break apart their personality, destroy their memory, and eventually leave them in a vegetative state. Those who die of heart failure or other sudden causes may be the lucky ones. Some do manage to live with much of their cognitive abilities intact to a very old age, But it seems that living past about 125 years is impossible for us. Eventually, everyone dies. They may be remembered, at least by their loved ones, and the consequences of their actions will reverberate in reality for a time. Nothing lasts forever. That's all I wanted to say about cognitive development. I hope you found it useful. Next time I will discuss psychosocial development. See you back on the channel then. Bye for now. If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.